Welcome to another edition of Minot Matters here at the Dakota, and I'm Jonathan Starr. Today, I'm joined by City Manager Harold Stewart. And so we needed to have you back on because we have a very important topic to discuss today.
Okay. Shoot.
Sonic,
yes.
That was at a city council meeting a while ago. You're going through stuff, and as should be, experiences referenced, and that was one we did not have on the Blue Rider bingo card.
Probably didn't expect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have that, but it wasn't just, I guess when you talk about Sonic specifically though, like the picture that some might come up with is like you're on rollerblades living the Sonic life. Is that true? Like, did you actually get to have that part of Sonic?
I did car hop. I didn't do the roller skates and the rollerblading stuff. I wasn't confident that I wouldn't dump drinks and food into people's laps, which they usually didn't care for. So
yeah.
But yeah, I did all aspects. I had graduated high school.
Okay.
And moved to a community, and being young and fairly inexperienced. I mean, I had other jobs prior to that,
right.
but not exactly in the professional world. And so I think I applied for an entry-level cook position, and probably within 6 months, I was the assistant manager of a Sonic that back in the mid-'90s was grossing probably about $1 million a year in sales.
Yeah.
So here I am at 18 years old, pretty much in charge of this
That's
high
crazy.
volume fast food restaurant and managing people and those kinds of things. And was in and out of that over the years after that until I went to college and kind of changed my trajectory a little bit.
What was more stressful, being at the start of your career, managing $1 million cash flow or whatever that metric is, Sonic, or having all the experience and managing a city? Sure. Both of them has to have their own unique stress points.
Yeah, it's different. It's stressful. Both of them.
Yeah.
Being a restaurant manager, it was 80-hour weeks.
Right.
Flipping burgers, cleaning grease, trying to help instill a work ethic into the next generation. But really, my start to public service really happened with Sonic. I was on the local chamber board, and I enjoyed being in a position where I could be a decision maker, but also have an impact on the community in some shape or form. And so that really kind of laid the foundation as I went to college and trying to determine what I want to do for the rest of my life. That I wanted to be in public service. I could be in management, but I can make a difference in a community. And that's why I even chose local government over like state or federal.
Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to be closer to where I could see the impacts of the policies and the changes and those kinds of things and not be so insulated to it. Some days I appreciate that. Some days I don't.
Right. Yeah.
But Sonic was really the kind of the foundation to being where I'm at today. So the stress is different, unfortunately. A lot of times working for Sonic, I felt like I was in a soap opera. So-and-so was within a relationship with so-and-so,
exactly.
and whatever.
Right.
And I still get involved in a bit of drama today. I'm not just speaking about Minot. I've been in other organizations that I've had to navigate drama.
Yeah. As long as there's people, there's drama,
there's
right?
drama.
Yeah.
Right. And so
it's just a side effect. No, that's interesting. I think probably what the most interesting part though about it, and even looking back at my life, sometimes I wish I would have taken better advantage of moments, is those moments like that at Sonic that a lot of other people just overlooked, and it was a job that they were trying to get money so that way they could go and do whatever they wanted to do. That is can be, if you allow it to, a basis for a career.
Sure.
Like I'm sure you referenced it at a city council meeting. There's something there that stood out enough for you there that you're able to use, whether it's just referring to that industry or whether it's actual leadership experience or whatever experience,
Yeah. And there's a lot of management principles I learned from there that I still use today.
Mm-hmm.
You run into a point where things aren't going smoothly, and you have to be able to identify quickly what's going on, what's the remedy for that. And you have to be in the right position to be able to see that, and you have to be looking for it. Otherwise it goes off tracks pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of those skills, dealing with people, learned a lot of customer service skills when I was at Sonic.
Yeah.
Upset customers, those kinds of things. And maybe even if my staff did everything right, they were still upset, and you have to figure out how to de-escalate that and handle that. training a staff, making sure that they're consistently providing the service and the quality of product that you want going out the door,
Right.
those kinds of things. And so, yeah, a lot of valuable lessons from those days that I still go back to.
One last question on this topic, but grouping, and I don't know your whole career, so it may be an unfair question. And if it is, just be like, Sonic is the best. But grouping government, because I'm not trying to identify a specific city or anything like that you've worked at. So grouping the government jobs into one group, what would be one of the funnest jobs that you had, and across your career? Was it a Sonic type job, or was it the government? You know your career better than me.
I wouldn't say it was Sonic. I would say, so we'll go down another rabbit hole here.
Yes.
So I've had multiple jobs and different things to do throughout my career, but
right.
I'll answer with two. The first one would be my first job, and that was I worked for a Cub Scout ranch in Texas when I was 14. So I spent the whole summer, basically camping every night and eating the chow hall food and teaching Cub Scouts orienteering, how to use a compass, and those kinds of things. That was a fun summer. I think I made a whole $50 a week plus room and board. So I wasn't getting rich off of that, but that was a blast of a summer, and that was my first job.
Yeah.
But then fast forwarding, when I lived in Utah, my wife was finishing college, and I worked for basically a lawn care company.
Okay.
I got licensed as a chemical applicator, herbicides, pesticides, those kinds of things. And I enjoyed being out and independent and that kind of stuff. But what I really enjoyed most was the approach that the owner took. Okay. And probably some of the funnest meetings I had was on a rainy day at the end of the season. We're getting ready to wrap up and winterize everything. And he just wanted to have feedback on what went well over the season, what didn't go well, and what he could do better as an employer. Wow. Supporting us as staff, but then also how he could strengthen his business and make it more profitable. And I don't think I ever laughed so much in a meeting like that. We talked about, turning our big tank trucks into looking like cows, and we had all kinds of goofy, fun, mottos or whatever else. But really it was the intent of taking that employee feedback and striving to push his business to be better every year. Yeah. And having some fun with it at the same time. I think that was probably a good one.
Again, principles that you still use today. What I guess we'll segue actually quite well. One thing that Minot just got done doing, jumping into the middle of city business, is these neighborhood meetings. Kind of the first, I believe, it was not trial, but a new thing that you guys were trying to do. And it was talked about at the city council meeting recently, like figure out how to get people there, which that's a deal, but more focused on the meetings. How did you feel like they went? It was from a public side, it felt like a good experience, but how did you guys feel like it went?
Well, for me, the first and main priority this round was to at least just get it started. Right. And I hope the community can recognize that we as an organization are making the effort. Mm-hmm. Right. And, participation built up with each one. We hope that continues. I think we still have a long ways to go to get it to where I had hoped and envisioned, but at least we have it started. Right. And I think that was the important piece this time through. And we want to engage with citizens. We want to hear from them. Not everyone wants to come and speak at the formality of a city council meeting. So this was an effort to provide a different format, less formal, that hopefully the public feels comfortable coming and participating and asking questions. And I hope we get to a point where I think we'll always provide some presentation or some information to try and help educate. Right. But I want to spend more time of listening and engaging with questions, which we have to have citizens there to ask questions in order to do that. So
two-sided deal there. What was interesting about it to me was, first off, we're blessed, and you have a lot to do with this, with a city that cares, and they put a lot of work into stuff like that. We commented it on the budget process last year, and again, this was not just something where you guys showed up and were like, all right, we're here, what do you guys want to talk about? You guys had a plan and all that, and that is fantastic. But something else too is you had kind of a topic for each meeting, but you're willing to accept questions outside the scope. Somebody may not be able to attend the XYZ meeting or the construction one this summer and had questions about construction. But you guys also had some difficult questions thrown at you guys, which is fantastic because it's in the moment, you're sitting there, maybe it gets a little bit awkward and intense and all that. But what a measure of transparency. People get upset. I know you don't need to comment on this, but people get upset because, you know, the guys just sit there, they'll ask our question, be like, yeah, that's right. Nobody's going to respond to that question because it's for whatever reason that happens. But here's an area where people can show up, they can ask their hard questions, and you guys answered them, along with the easy questions of how's construction going to be affecting this area of town, which isn't an easy question either. Sure. But you had both elements, and I thought that was commendable. And like, when you come to the Q&A part of this, what is your goal? I know the service level goal, but what kind of conversations are you guys hoping begins to happen there?
Well, I would say all of the above. I mean, I'm glad that you made those observations, because that's ultimately what we're getting to. And, you know, I want a safe space that those tough questions or those hard feelings can be asked. I don't expect everyone to agree that the way we're handling things is the way they think that it needs to be done. And there can be some strong opinions out there, and some people may think that we're doing things completely wrong. So what a great place to have that conversation and talk about that. And the one thing I want to make sure that happens with that, and this is what I've been trying to tell staff, is we got to respond with truth and facts. Right. But we don't want that to get into a defensive debate either. Right. So I don't want the city to be perceived that we're going to get into an argument with a citizen there. But we do want to provide correct information back, and we want to listen to that. At the same time, though, I don't want to let staff just get bullied and completely thrown under the bus. Right. So there has to be some measure of decorum there that needs to be kept. Yep. But, you know, having differences of opinion, and sometimes passionate differences of opinion, is okay. And I think that's healthy, and creating a safe environment for that conversation to happen between our elected officials, our staff, and our public, I think is important. No,
that's really good. I think it's interesting when you go and look at other cities. I saw clips, and it's about a certain issue. I'm not sure what the format exactly was, but in other areas, like you may have 30 seconds to go and just state whether you're in favor or opposed to something, or what, not actually have conversation on the matter. And that's something that has been done well. Something else, this is just, you'll know more about this, but you had a trip with the Chamber EDC, right? And there was an award that was won, and it was a good trip to DC. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there's an association called the Association of Defense Communities that any community in the country that supports and is home to a military base, whether that's Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard.
There's 5 or 6 of them,
Space
right?
Patrol, all of them.
Space Force.
I think I got them all now.
Yeah.
That we can come together and we can talk about the challenges and the issues. Okay. Because in all these bases, these are of value to us, right?
Right.
They're part of our identity. They're part of our culture. They're part of our economics. They play major roles in multiple fashions. And so being able to be there and find ways that we can be supportive, I think, is important. And so the city of Minot, separate from MACDC, is a member of this association. Okay. And so I went to attend on behalf there. And so, and it's great, we have a great partnership with MACDC and Task Force 21 and what they're doing. But I went as the city manager of a community that has a military base, so I can see from a city perspective what we can do as an organization to make sure that this asset remains in our community.
Absolutely.
And that we're doing what we can to partner with them and support them as best we can, in addition to Task Force 21 and MACDC. And so, some of the things I was there and I heard about, and I put a little bit of a synopsis on this in my city manager report for the council meeting this last Monday. One, obviously with national politics, the change in administration, there's a different approach financially and staffing wise and all that kind of stuff. So having an idea where that's going, wasn't too long ago here, probably back in 2005, there was conversations about a BRAC, which is a base realignment or closure process. That's what BRAC stands for.
I see.
Obviously we don't want the Minot Air Force Base to be shut down or reduced in its capacity. And so if that's what's being talked about, the sooner we can be aware of that and be involved to help protect that asset in our community, that's important. And so I was there for that purpose to see where that conversation is at. What are the pressures? What are the risks? In addition, with what's happening globally across the world right now with Russia and China and North Korea and all those kinds of things, they are closing the gap on us when it comes to nuclear deterrence in their technology and what they have available in number and those kinds of things. And so that global world is changing. And with that comes potentially cybersecurity attacks and those kinds of things on infrastructure at the local level that a lot of people don't think about. So, for example, we provide water to the base.
Okay. Yeah.
And so if our water plant is subject to a cyber attack that shuts that down and I'm not able to pump water anymore, that affects the base, that affects their ability to deliver that mission.
Right.
And so what protections do we need to put in place at the local level to make sure that the base doesn't have to worry about that?
Yeah.
That in times of emergency, that they can maintain core services, that they can fulfill their mission, whether that's water, sewer, electrical power, those kinds of things. And what is our role in that?
This is an interesting topic because we kind of, like, there's a major two-way street that goes on here between Minot and its partners. Sometimes it's glossed over, like, Minot, first off, Minot First Base would never lease Minot, right? They're cemented here. But, I mean, there's a reason they came here. There can be a reason why they leave.
Sure.
And so going in, making sure that those channels between our partners are open is good. And then what you brought up there at the end, like how much of an impact we actually play. It's something where it's like, okay, cool. They make in this economic impact in the city, or they make, and it's, we'll put a high school on North Hill, which is great, but we'll to support, but there's a lot larger impact that goes on when you just think about the actual infrastructure that we're providing and allowing for that to happen. So what does happen if there's a bomb that takes out our water plant? Do you guys have contingencies for stuff like that?
Well, it depends on, you have to assess the damage at that point.
Right.
But, we don't have the financial capacity to operate multiple redundancies within a water.
For sure you don't.
But we do have the ability, and this is one of the beauties, I think, of NAS is, we do have the flexibility between surface water versus groundwater.
Okay.
Wells to bring in. And so we're not discontinuing our infrastructure or those kinds of things. We use the well system as a backup.
Right.
To the Lake Sakakawea water, so we do have some redundancy built in, but at the end of the day, the single point of challenge there is the plant itself.
Right.
And if something happens to that plant, and it may not even be a physical attack on the plant, it could be a cyber attack because we're getting more and more technology and computer aligned, and my staff can monitor the operations of the entire plant via an app on their phone.
Wow.
And anytime you have that, there is a potential subject of a cyber attack that if they come in and digitally kind of take over and change things, that's what we have to make sure that we have the firewalls and those kinds of things that we minimize that security risk.
When you break down the world, it becomes so simple, but also the sophistication of it all it's intricate. That's the word I'm looking for. There's just so much there. Interesting. So you could go, if the phone got in the wrong hands, potentially, I know this is like a worst case scenario that we probably shouldn't talk about, but like there could be, somebody could get held at gunpoint, their phone taken from them. They could mess with our water plant potentially, right? I know that's like a very not going to happen scenario, most likely.
Yeah, we hope it minimum, but the technology that we put in place that creates efficiency also potentially creates security risks. They don't have to access the phone. It could be through a software upgrade where a Trojan's in there, and then they can remotely take over. Yeah.
And that's not just water plants. That's your just XYZ. It's just the technology problems that we face, the downsides of technology. Interesting. That's not why we're here to talk about technology, but it's a good topic. Yeah. Very interesting. All right. So a good trip solid trip to DC. Let's switch topics. Let's go to a topic that is on the minds of everybody in Minot, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people. We've seen a ton of engagement around the topics, and obviously City of Minot, they're been through a lot of investigations, at least recently, and all that. And there's all the public perception, there's all this stuff that is talked about, but at the core of this, you have an organization that's trying to function with people that you talk about the fishbowl that the city is. the glass just got cleaned. We can see it a lot more right now, and
Sure.
I'm sure that's felt.
Yes.
How is that going? How is this city employees doing? How is the morale there? Like along those lines, I'll begin there.
Well, it's been a pretty heavy weight for a lot of us from top down,
Right.
You know, issues come forward. They are issues that were legitimate issues that needed to be addressed.
Right.
You know, my job is to make sure that those issues are addressed, that they're addressed appropriately, they're addressed as quickly and cleanly as possible, that we're following policy and laws and those kinds of things, that we're putting the organization as a whole in the best defensive position, considering all risks and factors, but also putting us on a trajectory that it can be better in the future.
Right.
And again, just like we kind of talked about earlier in the broadcast, you know, there's a lot of differences of opinions, you know, on the right way to handle something or not handle those types of things. And so, but at the end of the day, you know, there's been a mental and emotional toll on the organization and the staff as a whole due to multiple reasons through these periods. And so we're trying to focus on one, knock on wood. I think all the investigations are done and complete at this point. I'm hoping we don't have any more.
Right.
So we can focus on moving the organization forward, getting the right leadership in place, involving staff more into our processes as how we make decisions and communicate those out, strengthening communication from top to bottom. We're getting ready to go into a pretty tough budget process here as well.
Yeah.
And which is going to add more strain on the organization. But it's an issue that we're going to have to tackle. And so our hope is that we can stand shoulder to shoulder and work on that together from top to bottom and move the organization forward in a positive way. So we're investing a lot of time into training our staff in multiple ways and improving in those areas. You know, even while we implemented the neighborhoods communication meetings, we also implemented internally our first kind of supervisor meeting across the organization. So we brought all the supervisors into one meeting and we covered specific topics. And we tried to balance between providing training of, you know, you're a supervisor now and you may not have ever received training on this, but here's how we can help you handle disciplinary matters. This is how we can help you be a leader. There's a difference between being a manager and being a leader, right? Yes. And so let's talk about what the skill sets are for a leader, because we need you to not just be managers. We also need you to be leaders within the organization. So we're beginning to have those conversations, provide those types of training, and use those as tools to have internal conversations about policies and approach and culture and those kinds of things. And so I think we're beginning to make progress on that. And I think that will pay dividends into the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How can the residents of Minot support this city? I mean, for the police, there was a blue light, and we talked with interim chief or Captain Del Plessis, and he said that was substantial. It was good to see the support of Minot around the police department. Is there something, whether it's a letter, whether it's dropping off XYZ restaurant, catering and a lunch or something like that? How can the city, the residents of Minot support the city and say, hey, we still have you guys' back?
Well, it's going to be basic 101, and kind of going back to my days as a political science major. You know, we're built as a democracy and a republic. Yeah. Right. We're a government for the people, of the people, by the people. Right. Right. Well, that doesn't work very well if the people aren't engaged.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right. So for me, the key thing, and you'll hear me harp on this a little bit too, as we go through the budget process, get engaged, get informed. Yeah. Right. I think there's a lot of misconceptions of us because people aren't informed necessarily. They go off of assumptions or what somebody else told them without going and doing their own due diligence to one, find out if that's factual or not. Or two is we paint government officials and government employees with a very broad brush. And unfortunately, when something negative happens, we assume that everybody's that way. Right. Well, I would argue that that's very minimal. Right. And if anything, we've shown here through the last few months that we will correct those when those come to our attention. And we are correcting that.
Yep.
But not all of our employers that way. I have the vast majority of my employees are very passionate about doing their best, serving our community. They're public servants, and they take pride in that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing great things every day.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I think that's the piece that I would encourage people to do is become engaged.
Right.
Come to the council meetings or watch them online. Come to our neighborhood services meetings. If you have questions, ask the question.
Right. Yeah.
We're always happy to provide transparency and answers. And there's very few things that we're going to keep closed. And even the things, and this has been part of the issue here over the last few months, even the things that may not paint us in the best light, we're not going to hide.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
And we'll put it out there because that's the best way to address it, to move on for the future. And so that would be my answer to that the public can support by becoming engaged.
Absolutely. No,
become informed citizens within our community.
That's perhaps an answer that doesn't feel like it'd be the expected answer, but it makes a lot of sense because for better or for worse, you do feel that support. I think that was kind of a respect to, I really try not to throw shade. Okay. At the neighborhood meetings, so there was good turnout a couple times, but some of it's like, it's bummer because there's a lot of work that department leader, and I'm sure some of his staff, definitely your staff, help put into these meetings to make it a success. They sat down, whether that was 1 hour, whether that was a few hours, and making sure that everything was put together just right for this moment. And the support of the people in those moments, just by showing up, asking questions, makes it worthwhile, especially when you hear a complaint in a citizen satisfaction survey, something like that, where you don't necessarily get the best ratings for being as open or transparency, but that's not the one. Community engagement is the one that's looking for. Like, there's not enough from you guys as the city. Like, it's definitely a two-way street. And I'm not wanting to put you in a bad. If you want to come on that's great. But I'm not trying to put you into a hole there.
Just real quick on that. So, which is a better way to correct behavior, discipline or positive reinforcement?
Yeah, it depends on the behavior.
Right. So if we as a community, so here's some of the challenge I have when I went back and I said the important objective of this first round was to get it started.
Yeah.
Right. I can tell you right now, we got staff that grumble like, we're gonna have another public meeting. No one's going to show up.
Yeah.
Right. This is a waste of time and effort and resources to do this. Right.
Right.
So I would encourage the public to give positive reinforcement to that type of behavior. If that's what you want to see the city do, then you have to come and participate.
Right.
Right. Because if you don't show up, that does not reinforce that positive action. It makes it harder to do it again the next time. Now, as we talked about at Monday's meeting with the council, and I think the council understands this, we're going to keep pressing forward. Mm-hmm. But over time, if we keep going after round after round after round of this, and it's not worth the time and the effort, it's not going to continue happening.
Right. Yep.
So if that's a change that you want, then you need to reinforce that by showing up and coming and participating, asking questions, using it to be informed, and then it will continue and it'll get stronger. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great example. Couple positions that need filled at the city, the HR and the police chief. HR position, human resources position. How does that process look like for you guys? Obviously, there's the job listing on Indeed or whatever. I chose not to apply for either one of them. I figured I might not be the most qualified candidate for either. How does that process work on your guys'? I'm sure it's pretty standard, but I'm sure there's a recruiter involved in all that stuff.
Yeah, we have a consultant on board that we've had a lot of success with over the years in bringing in qualified talent to our organization. So we're reutilizing them. Of course, it's a big enough organization. They have different teams depending on what the position is you're recruiting in. And so the HR director, I was just in a meeting earlier this week that we've got a pretty good pool of candidates. So we're scheduling interviews for later this month for that. We will bring them in. We'll have a panel that will help do that interview process. That'll be made up of a lot of different cross sections of the internal staff and council. We're also going to bring in hopefully another HR director from another organization within our community that can provide that expertise. Yeah, and we'll go through that and we'll take all the input from all of that to see who's really rising to the top. That's a good fit for our community and our organization, but also has the skills and the experiences necessary to take us to a new level.
Right.
And this is one of the things I always love about anytime a position opens up. It's an opportunity to potentially take us to a new level.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? And so that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm pushing for. I want the HR department to be one that is supporting our staff and is an advocate for our employees and is advocating for different approaches and things that make us a place that employees feel heard and safe and supported. And HR plays a critical role in that. And so I want that to continue and to be elevated if we can.
I have a question on HR real fast.
Sure.
Who fills that role in the meantime?
So right now I have appointed the assistant city manager as the interim HR director.
Gotcha.
Which is why he was, so when the challenge with the mayor arose with the complaint and those kinds of things by policy as approved by council and the Civil Service Commission, if there's a complaint of that nature that comes forward, either against the city manager or one of the elected officials, the HR director is responsible for the investigation. We got that notice about in the last week of the previous HR director. And so I had appointed the assistant city manager to be the interim HR director. And so he took that role in accordance with policy to fulfill that. Very cool.
Very cool. The next subject is the police chief. That one is very well publicized of who is filling the interim there. But if you'd break down that process as well.
Similar process going through all that, although there'll probably be a lot more public participation in that, given the nature of the service that provides to our community. And HR is more like an internal service to the organization, where police is very much outward facing. One of the core services we provide that affects the public very directly. And so we will have a process there through that day. Again, it will have a panel that will have a mix of council and staff and other partners and professionals in the law enforcement service. But we'll also have a public process where people can come and meet the candidates and provide feedback as part of that. That one, so far the candidate pool has not been as strong. We had to extend the deadline to try and get more candidates to apply for that. And that's going to be a challenging position to fill due to a lot of the different changes and things that we've had here over the last few months.
Yeah, and that one, the goal on it was that it would have a long-term position or long-term person filling the position in around a year's time, right? So it's not necessarily like it's been too long or whatever. And I know that's probably up for opinion and there's discussions that it can have. But originally the plan was that it was going to be an interim position for around a year.
Sure. Okay. Well, 6 months to a maximum of a year.
6 months to a maximum.
Was the original intent.
Yep. That's right.
So,
and how long does the hiring? I know that this is just information, but the city process, I'm sure that you guys have a process when it comes to hiring. It's not just, especially for a department lead, it's not just, oh yeah, I actually like you. You start Monday. There's probably a process. How long does that process work? It's
usually a couple of months at least, just to go from time of application to screening of the applicants to the interviews to the hiring, and then somebody comes on board. That can be anywhere from a 2 to 3, 4 month period. Again, the goal here is to get the right person in place, and not just fill it with a body. And so, and if we're not getting the right applicants or the right fits for those, we may have to do the process over again. And every time we do it over again,
2 or 3 months.
And this is one of the differences probably between the public sector as a government versus the private sector. Private sector, if you want to interview somebody and you like them, you're good. When can you start? It doesn't really matter whether I need to give everyone else an opportunity to apply.
Exactly.
In a public position with taxpayer dollars, everyone has a fair, equal opportunity to that, and we make sure that the process is protected. That we're hiring off of merit, and everyone has an equal opportunity. So whether or not I like somebody, I still have to go through the whole process and justify the hiring of that person over anybody else. Right. And so that takes more time.
And then does that have to be approved by council?
So by ordinance, any department head position has to be approved by council. Very yes, cool. The HR director and the police chief, I will make a recommendation, and then council will have to approve that.
Very cool. Awesome. Obviously right now we have interim chief classes. which I struggle what I need to call him. But what was most entertaining was at recent city council, the struggle to identify what we call city council president or mayor or interim mayor or acting mayor, Mark Janser.
Sure.
What are you going to call him?
I think I'm just going to defer to Mayor Janser, because that's the role he's in now.
Exactly.
Whether it's acting or not, he is the mayor.
Exactly.
And so I think I'm just going to refer to him as Mayor.
Keep it
Janser
simple
at this time.
Yeah, it was neat, or maybe neat's the wrong word, but it was fun to see how that affected city council people. But it was also fun to see how it affected residents as they go to make their public appearances. Like, oh man, I forgot about this part. I prepared everything else. I just didn't prepare for what I was going to call the guy I needed our address. Fun things in the whole process. Now, there's something that you guys are stepping into that I think Dave Lakefield thinks is fun. I'm not sure that everybody else feels like it's as much fun.
Sure.
And it's the budget process.
Yeah.
And this is pretty intense. As we go step into this, I was sad because at the State of the City and whatever, you didn't get to speak this year. Last time you did speak a little bit, and you talked about some priorities that you had. What are some priorities that you have in the budget process as we look at that for 2026?
So as I look forward, there's a few things, and there's some pieces that I think need to be put into place to maintain fiscal sustainability into the future. One, obviously, there is no appetite for increased revenues, whether that's through property taxes or fees or those kinds of things. So I think the message has been loud and clear that we need to learn how to operate within the revenues that we have currently. Yeah. And then we take in the conversation at the state level with regards to the property tax caps and those kinds of things. Some will argue that maybe that's not going far enough or whatever, but we'll let the citizens and the elected officials talk about that. But from an administrative standpoint, I have to deal with the realities that are in front of us, right? So we gotta figure that out, and doing some financial analysis. My concern is that the rate at which expenses have increased over the last several years, and as they're projected out in the future, are growing at a significant rate faster than our revenues are.
Gotcha.
And so there needs to be a course correction to that, which comes with some impacts. Yeah. Right. Now the question will be is what impacts are we willing to accept to be able to do that, right? And so, we're working on, this will be the first year that we'll talk about what we call the VERF, Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund. Yes. Where, staff has been doing a good job diligently trying to put together a plan that we're budgeting more conscientiously with each budget, that when a vehicle or piece of equipment needs to be replaced, we've already accounted for that. We have finances in place to be able to do that at the time that it needs to be done, versus just every year trying to figure out, well, how do we pay for these vehicles that we need to replace? But that'll come with a cost in trying to fit that into the budget, because there'll be a carryover, at least for the first few years, of we still have to replace the vehicles that need to be replaced, but we need to begin setting aside money for the future for the next time that vehicle needs to be replaced. Right. And so that comes with a cost burden for at least temporarily for a few years until we get that established and caught up. So that'll be one of my main priorities. And we'll have to talk through on how do we gain efficiencies within the organization. Because one of the challenges that we're going to have is not only are we doing this course correction, but, our employees are feeling these same financial pressures, right? The cost of eggs at the grocery store and milk and, the cost of buying a vehicle, the cost of a home, all these types of things, those impact our employees as well. So they want, a pay increase to help cover that. And if our revenues are flat, and our biggest investment as an organization is into our staff and into our people. So if that cost continues to go up while our revenues are flat or not growing as quickly, that means we have to make corrections. And at some point, it'll come to what I call a future cannibalism. Okay. In order to pay our current staff more, there has to be less of them.
I see. Right. And
from a fiscal standpoint, because we can't afford to maintain the same amount and pay everyone more money. Yep. And so, we have to work through that, which isn't going to be a popular conversation, and in an already stressed environment, is going to be difficult to talk about.
So when you talk about course correction, one thing is new revenues. If there's a cap and we don't know exactly what it looks like, and we try to go and make sure that it's not in law yet, maybe there won't be a cap. We just don't know. But new revenues potentially, it seems like, won't be affected by it. And so what I mean new revenue is if I went and built a $5 million building that cost $75K a year in property taxes, then that would be new revenue to the property tax roll that would not be capped. Obviously it's difficult for the city there's things that you guys do, but as far as like actually making these things happen, it's difficult. You have to have players, you have to have the whole works. But how does that affect it? Can that at all be a priority in growing that? Because I'm sure if there was a $75K building for property taxes that was added to the city, that was not stretching the city limits, that was not being added in, that was just in the part of downtown, whatever, it doesn't matter where it's at, where there's not new infrastructure that's needing to be ran, I'm sure this would be good for the city, right?
Sure.
Okay. Is that stuff that at all gets to play into the discussion when you're looking at the property taxes and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would all agree that, we want Minot to grow,
right?
In the argument that a rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah,
right.
But
with growth also comes other challenges.
It does.
Of costs and infrastructure and, those kinds of things.
Right.
So if we go from a community of 47,000 to, let's say 55,000 over the next 10 years, just for sake of conversation, well, that increase of population means I need more firefighters. I need more police officers, those kinds of things. So that comes with costs.
Right.
And then the question is how do we effectively get that growth to occur? And that's another area that we have some significant differences of opinion.
Yeah, right. For sure. Yep.
And I'm still waiting for the community of Minot to give me a clear direction of which of those approaches are we going to do, because I feel like I get caught in the middle of both of those.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And just give me a direction on which one we're going to do.
Right.
And that's the challenge and the debate that we're having. And then you take into account the fact of, for a developer to invest money, there has to be a significant return on investment.
It does.
So they have a choice to make. Are we going to invest in Minot, North Dakota, or am I going to invest somewhere in Minnesota?
Right.
Well, the return on investment may be greater in Minnesota than it is in North Dakota.
Yeah.
And then we have the cost of construction. We have the logistics of getting to us.
Short season.
So not only do we have inflationary pressures throughout the country, but it's
a lot of factors.
It's even heavier in Minot, North Dakota. So all those factors come into play. Ultimately, yes, growth would help alleviate some of these issues, but again, with growth potentially comes cost, and you have to balance that out.
There'd almost have to be a study done of like, if we had this amount of growth, we could have it without increasing our costs. And I'm sure you guys look, and that's not something you can comment on if you want, but.
And I'm not going to say that I agree with this philosophy, but I've seen it in other communities, and I wouldn't advocate for this here, but I have seen communities that they calculate out what their cost of service is and what the average value of a home needs to be able to be to generate the revenue support that cost.
Yeah.
And then they start putting into place in their ordinances things that guarantees that you can't build a home for less than that value within their community.
Yeah.
Right. They backwards, they reverse it,
Yeah.
reverse engineer it back.
You would do in business.
Which I don't agree with that philosophy. So please don't,
this
line
is
up
the new
and, the
principle
community
we're
is
doing.
recommending that, we're going to regulate to the point to guarantee that assessed values are held at a certain point, because I don't agree with that. But I have seen communities take that approach.
Right. Yeah.
And, but that's those are the challenges that there is a cost to government.
There is.
And one of my biggest challenges is going into a difficult budget. This isn't my first difficult budget to deal with, right? It's easy for us to say, well, we want our property taxes to go down. We think the city wastes money. We need to cut costs. I've been through those conversations. The challenge is, and we'll probably see it more this year based off the direction from council on Monday night, of wanting to go more line by line through the department budgets. The challenges that I've had is every time I've gone in and say, let's say I need to go in and cut $500,000,
Yeah.
and we're gonna go line by line through budgets. Every time we do that, I come out with ways to spend 1.5 million more,
Yeah.
and we never cut the $500,000.
Right,
Because
yeah.
as we go through, we're like, well, that's an important service.
Right.
And not only is that important, we have that underfunded. We need to spend more money there,
Right. Yep.
right?
I see.
And so the challenge will be is if we truly want to reduce government, where are we going to do that?
Right.
Because every time you do that, you run into those political opinions again of, I don't think it's important. And this person says, no, is it important? We need more emphasis
Right. Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
how do we balance that?
That's a really good point there. It'll be interesting. We'll be excited to follow on the budget process. There's some good discussions that come with that. Something that is kind of connected in is flood money. We had a good conversation with Mayor Janser on this, and it was talking about we had the potential to get around $125 million from the state. That got dwindled down to 65, but last year we were in the mid 70s. We were around 76 million. What does, and I understand that this is a very broad topic that a lot of people have input on, and this is another one where you can give a ballpark and the next person will say, you need double that. Where do you feel like the funding needs to be for the flood project in order to keep it on track, to get it completed on time, whatever that might look like?
Well, the effort that our community made last legislative session in 2023 was to try and get ahead of it a little bit. That's where we got the legislative intent for the 76.1 million per legislative session or per biennium.
Yep.
To be funded for the next 5 sessions, so
Okay.
10 years approximately. Yep. And we felt at that time that would help us get it done, minimize some of the costs and the inflationary pressures and those kinds of things. So at least from a city staff perspective and going into the legislative session this year, what we went into was trying to hold to that 76.1 million as was agreed to last legislative session. Yeah. We did have some champions and some legislative leaders who approached us and said, hey, we agree. We want to be supportive of trying to get this done quicker, because the sooner the state isn't having to focus money towards this, the more we can focus on other things more quickly in the future. So that effort to go from 76.1 million to 125 million was really led by the legislative leaders.
I see.
Not by the city of Minot. Now, we weren't necessarily opposed to that.
Right.
Because again, the sooner we can get this done, the better for everybody.
Absolutely.
So if we had the support to do that, we were going to cooperate with that. Yep. And that's what we were trying to do. So at the end of the day, if it reverts back to the 76.1, which was our original goal and objective, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
Going lower than that to the 65 million is a challenge. That's at a point where we're going to have difficulty treading water, and I don't know when we get that done. Gotcha. At any foreseeable point in the future. The 76.1 million at least gives us an objective that we're confident we can get that done in the next 15 to 20 years. Mm-hmm. Very good. An accelerated amount helps us do that quicker, hopefully, although we have to absorb whatever the workforce issues and the inflation issues and pressures and those kinds of things. Right.
Yeah,
and so
inflation is
crazy. We've been working with Ackerman Esvold and those guys, value engineering through the project. So just because we budgeted $40 million to do this phase, if we can find ways to either keep it at the $40 million or reduce that amount, we're looking for those opportunities every day. And so our goal is still to get this done as quickly as possible and get it built right and do it with the least amount of fiscal impact that we possibly can. Those are our goals and objectives, but it's challenging. And without that financial support from the state, it becomes even more challenging. Right. I've been on the record since I've been here, and it's a testament to the strength of Minot to be able to do this. Most communities couldn't handle taking on a project like NAS alone. Right. Most communities couldn't take on a project like flood control alone. And for a community to do both of them at the same time and be successful with it is phenomenal. And so, but it comes with challenges and pressures. And that's another thing that I keep trying to remind staff and the council. The financial commitment to both NAS and flood control is such a big one. It affects everything else that we do.
Right.
If I could take the sales tax revenues that we're getting right now in our community and not dedicate almost all of it to those two projects,
Right.
I could push your property tax down significantly.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't have access to that revenue to do that because we're investing into flood control and knots, which are needed investments.
For sure.
But has an impact on us.
Yeah.
And we want to move on to funner and more exciting things, but we still have this financial commitment that we have to meet to protect the community.
Right. Yeah. You don't get to make the money, print the money. Because even another like push down property tax and then new or revised police station, there's needs that I think the community feels. Like it's not even a deal of people are like, we don't need that. I think the community agrees, but it's just nobody wants to have increased property taxes and all that.
At the end of the day, in some ways it's similar to like doing your home budget.
Yeah, it
right.
is.
I would love to go buy a new car, but I bought a new house.
Yep.
My current car is functioning.
Yep.
I need a little bit of money for maintenance of that and those kinds of things. But it's an issue of priorities, right? Do I want to go buy a new car or do I want to do that trip to Disneyland?
Right, yeah.
Right, because I don't have money to do both.
Exactly.
And so and our community's having to prioritize that. But we have such a big commitment to the first priorities.
Right.
That it diminishes our ability to do anything new or different.
Right. And the idea of getting rid of those priorities is just not feasible at this point. So it is what it is. Great conversation. We'll look forward to this budget process. It's going to be a good time. We'll probably reach out to have you back on near the end of it. But any things away from the city of Minot planned this year? You got trip to Medora, anything like that? You seem like you enjoy the outdoors.
My wife and I were just in Medora for a quick weekend trip here just a few weeks ago.
Nice.
We're a little early for not a lot of Medora was open, so we'll have to do another trip when it's more the tourist destination. Right. But no, we enjoy that. I'm actually headed out actually tomorrow. My dad turned 70 this week, and so we're kind of doing some golf and barbecue in Kansas City, and then I get home and I have a son who's a senior, and so he's trying to determine where he's going to go to college. So we're doing a college visit to Caltech in Pasadena, California. We leave Sunday and come back next week. So a few things going on to squeeze in there.
Golf. You enjoy golf?
I play a couple times a year. Yeah. I'm the kind of guy that if you want to feel good about your game, you take me.
Sweet.
And I tell people that me coming in 2 under is I find 2 balls more than I left with while I was out looking for mine.
Exactly.
So that's
right. I like it. It sounds like our games are very close to each other then. All right. Well, do appreciate you coming on. Been good conversation.
Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. This has been an episode of Minot Matters here at the Dakota. And be sure to like and subscribe. We'll have more content just like this coming your way. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.